Smoke so thick it blotted out the sun shining down on the nearly 80-year-old Sky Mesa Ranch home. From above, you see massive flames punching through the rooftop in several places. The heat and fire caused the 4,000-square-foot home to collapse on itself.
I think it's all burned. I don't know at this point if anything's salvageable.
El Camino Grace Church senior pastor David Bray lived here with 3 generations of his family. His son Todd and his wife were home at the time and called the fire department. The cause is still being investigated, but Alpine's fire chief says when they arrived, the outside wall of the laundry room was burning.
Emotionally, we're devastated, obviously, but I'm just thankful that, I have a faith in the Lord Jesus and as a pastor, and I know that he's got a purpose for everything.
Pastor Bray says over the years, the house was built and then repaired with whatever materials that were available. And that meant everything from timber to railroad ties. All of that old wood is what firefighters say caused it to burn most of today.
Here's a photo of those railroad ties. Also in the picture is the matriarch of Alpine, Beatrice LaForce. Her and her husband Claiborne built the home in 1946. B, as she was known, wrote the history of Alpine on this very typewriter. She was quoted to say, "I was born in the back of a wagon somewhere in Arkansas." B was an author and local librarian.
If it wasn't for B, most of this history would be lost.
Alpine Historical Society archivist Carol Morrison is the caretaker of such antiquities. The real value, though, is in her heart. When she heard Sky Mesa was on fire, Carol was nearly brought to tears.
Just as it is now, a lump in my throat. It's like losing a person.
The damage has not yet been totaled, but the fire chief says there's no salvaging the home.
It's a death in the family, in the town.
In 2003, a developer purchased the 260-acre ranch. It was divided into parcels where homes were built. Left standing for the last 20 years was the old ranch house itself on a measly 1 acre of land. It's part of Alpine history that cannot be replaced.
It's part of the community, and I can't believe it's gone.
Dave Summers, NBC 7. A simple demolition notice posted at the closed gates signals the end of this iconic piece of history, anchored in the fond memories of millions that have made it a destination.
That's probably some of the saddest news I've ever heard. Being from here, I mean, this is like a piece of San Diego, especially Ocean Beach.
Perhaps none so disappointed as the surfers who come here daily.
I think it sucks, man.
King tides and the day in and day out battery of the sea have taken their toll. The pier was closed last October because of high wave damage. You might say its fate was sealed after a December storm took out a structural support. In an email, OB Pier Task Force engineer Ralph Tessier warned the city about the potential liability and danger to the public.
There's great concern about the safety of the pier these days. The city has put this substantial padlock and rig on the gates to prevent people from walking out on the surface. But as Tessier likes to say, while they've gated off this area, the most dangerous part is actually below the pier.
NBC 7 cameras were rolling for this bit of civil disobedience. Shooting the pier is, for some surfers, a rite of passage.
I've only done it a handful of times just because I don't want to die, but some guys are really crazy and do it all the time.
The weakened state perhaps makes crossing the giant underbelly more treacherous than ever. By city ordinance, it's against the law for people in the water to recreate within 75 feet from the pier.
I've never even heard anything about that. I've never seen any signs either.
In his email, Tessier wrote a warning to the city project engineer for the pier. This code section cited, I believe, is intended for an in-use pier, not for a critically damaged one. One may argue that a 75-foot distance may not be relevant to a damaged pier. January 10th, the city responded with a warning to stay back further than 75 feet and plans to post more warning signs. Even so, that warning may fall flat.
The best channel to paddle out is right next to the pylons, so the closer you are to the pier, the easier it is to get out to the outside sets. I don't think it's going to deter anybody from surfing near the pier.
NOB Dave Summers, NBC 7. The Cessna 210 creaks as it's surgically removed by the recovery team from the side of the hill on Caminito Claro. This woman, who wished not to be identified by name, lives just above where the plane crashed Wednesday night. Despite being steps away, she and her neighbors heard nothing. They found out about the crash when they saw it broadcast on the morning news.
Yeah, it was lucky for me and my neighbors. Really lucky.
Below, more residents of La Jolla Shores Heights condominiums watched wide-eyed.
I don't know if he was intending to do it or if it just got lucky. I have no idea.
Well, it's fortunate.
Very fortunate, yeah. It could have been a lot worse.
When you're in a situation, you do what you can.
Watching with special interest is licensed helicopter pilot Grant Katzenella-Bogan, who lives just up the street.
A couple feet higher, we'd hit a house. Based on his flight path, a couple feet lower, still vegetation. So, yeah, and on his flight path, then he could hit anything.
NTSB investigators have been on scene since around noon. They're not sharing many details about the crash, but we know the investigation is focusing on the pilot, the plane, and the weather conditions. It was rainy and foggy. We know from the radio transmission that the plane was out of fuel. The plane itself is almost fully intact.
While we know from radio communication between the tower and pilot, the plane was running out of fuel. NTSB investigator Paul Basti says the pilot failed twice to land at Montgomery Gibbs Field.
We don't have any information on any discussions with the dispatcher. Right now, what we're doing is looking to gather only the factual evidence.
If there were more troubles with the plane than an empty tank, they haven't yet been determined.
We're not able to comment on how the airplane performed in this environment.
After 3 hours, the plane was dismantled and loaded on a truck. Its next destination is Phoenix. There, in a crash lab, is where the plane will be dissected to determine the probable cause of this tragedy. Dave Summers, NBC 7. The attacks on the vehicles of Mira Mesa seem relentless. Cars destroyed in fires intentionally set. Deep scars left in keyed cars. And most recently, windows of parked cars shot out in drive-by fashion. This woman, fearing retaliation, asked that we identify her only as Anne, is a victim.
Honestly, pretty terrified, knowing that someone is on the street that, is doing that to other cars.
She says San Diego police are using this doorbell video recorded from her neighbor's home as evidence in the case. Her neighbor, we'll call Jane, is fed up with the crime. The trouble seemed to start in December of 2021. In a 3-week period, San Diego Metro Arson Strike Team, or MAST, investigated 8 deliberately set fires involving 35 cars. NBC 7 cameras were rolling January 3rd of 2022. That night, 8 vehicles were torched. Then, 29-year-old Omar Sakwal was handcuffed and detained by police in connection with the crimes. MAST investigator Sergeant Rick Petchin tells NBC 7 Sakwal was their #1 person of interest. We did send a case up to the DA, but they declined to prosecute based on what we had. So our investigation basically remains open, Sergeant Petchin said. District Attorney spokesperson Tanya Sierra tells NBC 7, we can only file charges when we believe we can prove them beyond a reasonable doubt, which is our ethical standard.
I'm very terrified because I feel he's an endangerment to our community. Something should have been done.
A felony complaint was filed August 25th of this year against now 30-year-old Omar Sakwal. He pleaded not guilty to 4 charges of vandalism in connection with the parked car shootings. During Sakwal's arraignment, Deputy District Attorney Gracia Araujo told the court, "This is an ongoing investigation, and it is more likely that he shattered approximately 24 cars in a short period with a BB gun." Court records indicate Judge Aaron Katz reduced his bond from $300,000 to $60,000. The only conditions, no firearms or driving, and being subject to a search at any time. With just 10% down, he was back home. A man believed to be his father answered the door. Neighbors know Omar is not in custody, and that leaves them uneasy, especially at night.
I fear that at this point, it's only a matter of time before he does escalate and harm someone.
Court records indicate Sakwal was convicted of making violent threats against family members in 2014 and 2019. In the 2019 case, he pleaded guilty to assault with a deadly weapon, but served only half his 6-month sentence in jail. In the newsroom, Dave Summers, NBC 7. A Border Patrol agent tells NBC 7 some 700 migrants collected here in the space between border fences on Wednesday. Aisha from West Africa arrived last night with 20 other travelers. The wife and mother says she is fleeing the violence in her own home.
My husband beats me anytime. I want to make my life better.
Conditions are primitive at this location. Trash is piled in the center of the encampment. Tents made of paint tarps and mylar thermal blankets dot the fence line. There have been women, children, and men here, but that was about to change.
We've had some complaints of some creepy stuff going on,
okay.
So we don't want anybody.
We knew it was coming.
The safety of women, children, everything.
Yeah, same as last time?
Yes.
A CBP supervisor received complaints, the nature of which caused the men to be moved a half-mile west of this location. Customs and Border Protection statistics indicate that from June to July, they've had a 30% increase in migrant encounters between ports of entry. That is still less than 1 year ago when the Title 42 health order was in effect.
The situation on this section of the border fence is reminiscent of the final days of Title 42, but the volunteer effort seems much more robust. There are separate stations. This is a cell phone charging station. Here we have donated clothes that they're giving to migrants. At this station you can get first aid, toiletries, and sunscreen. They're making cold sandwiches, even making hot food right here.
Among the volunteers is UCSD graduate student Yingji Fei.
And they charge their phones and give them back.
She says in just 2 hours, she's charged between 100 and 150 phones.
I love to help people.
Basic needs are being met. This woman, who wished only to be identified as a Georgian citizen, says things are bad in Eastern Europe.
We come in because we have big problem in country. We are hungry. We have so many difficult life there.
CBP blames aggressive human smugglers for the increase of migrants collecting here. Immigration advocates say asylum seekers are having trouble with or don't even know about the CB1 app used to get an appointment for processing. Nonetheless, there is great joy in making it this far.
Just now I'm talking to my sister. I say America people is the best. It's the best.
Near the San Ysidro port of entry.
Thank you so much for America people.
Dave Summers, NBC 7.